So, thanks, Marina, for joining me on the first episode of this series where, you bring more light on your sustainability journey and this career path, and really just hoping to shed some light on those who are also looking to get into this field, but really just trying to highlight, your experiences, what you studied, how it's been. So, did you want to introduce yourself a little bit, talk a little bit about what you do, what your role is, and what those duties entail?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to share my story and answer any questions you have. My name is Marina Lindsay. I'm a water resources manager at a water district in Orange County. And essentially what that is, it's a very behind the curtain job. I always describe to people sort of like a Wizard of Oz job. You don't necessarily know we're there until you need us, but Southern California doesn't have a lot of natural reservoirs to get fresh water from. So my position and many others like it basically purchase water from up from Northern California, from the Colorado River, store it and plan for all the people in Orange County, the different cities that we serve water to make sure there's enough. And if there's a drought, we work extra hard to bring more water down. And in my position, I also work with Watergy Energy Nexus information. So that's how much energy we use to supply water. We also have a number of water treatment plants and a lot of huge facilities going on for all of our different customers, but that's pretty much it. And the whole world of water is fascinating to me, and that's really the sector I'm in no matter what I'm doing.
So why is it that you chose this career path, and what did you study? What was your background to lead you up to this point in this water industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sort of like anybody in the job they end up, it can be kind of a winding path. Mine actually started back as early as high school. I had a wonderful teacher, Miss Sano, who taught an environmental science class. And back then, some of us were taking it because we heard it was an easy class or we heard it was an interesting subject. And she made it really interesting and also difficult, where she would be really pressuring you to make sure you had all the right answers and knew everything. And she did this wonderful thing, which had, she had a mock debate for an environmental issue. At the time, it was GMOs, pro or con, whether or not it should be allowed to happen. And everybody in the class was assigned a different role. Some were scientists, some were doctors, some were engineers, some were lawyers, and different fields. And I was assigned one of the lawyer positions, and we had so much fun, the people in that class. I would say probably 80% of the people went on to do something very similar to the role they were playing, just because we embodied it for like 2 months and really got into it. And I left that class knowing I wanted to go into environmental science. I didn't know you could have that job before that was even an option. And I was really between environmental management and environmental law. And so when I looked at applying for colleges the next year in high school, I was looking for programs that had something like that, law and management together. And of course, UCLA has a wonderful law school with a lot of undergrad opportunities to learn more about that, as well as a great environmental science program, which was still pretty new at the time. And they had, I think, 8 different minors or concentrations in that field. Some were systems and society, which was law. There was like earth system science and marine biology and geology and all these different fields where you could really learn a lot. And while I was there, I had a wonderful professor, Mark Gold, who's sort of a huge leader in the water industry just in general. And he brought in experts from every field, consultants, nonprofits, people with their own businesses to speak at each one of his classes. And he was really involved with Heal the Bay, that nonprofit, which does a lot of the water quality work in LA County and does report cards for whether or not it's safe for people to go in the water and that sort of thing. And from that class, I really knew I wanted to go into water resource management or water law. And as time went on, I graduated, I got a job working for the city of Santa Barbara in their water resources department as a water resource technician. My boss there had gone to the Bren School, and I'd heard a lot about the Bren School and knew that they had a great program for sustainable water markets. And I applied, got in, and that sort of decided the law school versus grad school for me, just because I could go. And from there, wonderful professors, wonderful people, the whole world of water resource management opened up. I got a job at a different water district that's more of a wholesale agency as an analyst. And then from there, got this job as a water resource planner. And the water world is great because you can really see a ladder and you can move up, and there's so many opportunities and so many people there. And along the way, I worked in labs and I was a researcher, and I got to do a UC partnership in international research and education internship in Australia and go look at Melbourne's water system, where it was always just, there was new opportunities. There was a lot of energy. There were great people and a lot of funky characters, because you have sort of the people out on boats doing surveillance and the people working in a water treatment plant just as operators, where there's a lot in the water world and a lot to manage, and humans need water and the environment needs water. So it's a great nexus of everything with a lot going on. So that's sort of how my winding path led to where I am now.
No, and I think that's great because I think overall, right now in the news and everything, we always hear about carbon emissions and like carbon, climate change. But that I feel like the issue with climate change is definitely more on the longer term end of things, which is still important. But what's great about people who work in water is that you are really working towards the stuff that's more near term issues, especially in California, right? Like we're in a drought, we've always been in a drought. Don't think we'll ever get out of it, honestly. But the thing that we can work towards now is making sure that the processes that we have to bring water in place is continuous, basically. And I think you mentioned a lot of really great things. And you mentioned that your first job out of college was being a water resource technician, correct? And I'm kind of just curious, like, how did you end up getting that role, and was entering the industry really difficult for you, or do you think when you were applying straight out of undergrad, was that something that was easy for you to do?
So that's a great question, and everybody's path is different, and sort of the hiring process or timeline is always different. Sometimes there's a lot of jobs in one sector out all at once. Sometimes there's nothing there, just depending on the year in the cycling or retirements, who's retiring and how everything gets shuffled around. So when I graduated, I knew I wanted to work in water and I wanted to have water in my title somehow. But as far as jobs, I wasn't really being picky of where I would go. I was just going after opportunities that were open to me. And so I applied for, I think, 4 or 5 positions while I was still doing my internship in Australia, because it was right after I graduated. The day I graduated, I started that internship with UCI. Down there, they moved us into a hotel. They had us working. And from there, I applied to a few positions. One was in San Francisco, 2 were in city of Santa Barbara, and 1 was in San Diego. And that was pretty much based upon where I knew people lived. I had friends in San Francisco. I knew I could sleep on a couch if I had an interview. Same thing in Santa Barbara and same thing in San Diego, where I would really enjoy living there. And I knew I had people there around, and I knew the water positions were open there. So I applied for 2 positions at City of Santa Barbara and got offered interviews at both of them. I think I got offered interviews at all of them, but I took the 2 at Santa Barbara because my best friend from high school lived there and was still in town. And interviewed for both, got offered both, which was a little awkward. One was a full-time position, meaning full hours, everything in the it was in economics and finance. It was sort of water rate pricing and that sort of thing, but it was listed as an economist position, didn't have water in the title. The other one was in the other side of the building in water distribution, which was a water resource technician. And you could work it full time or not, but it was an hourly position. So I knew if I did go to grad school, which I was definitely thinking about already, I could maybe finagle my way to have part hours when I was in grad school and working the full hours when I wasn't. Or it was a nice ease in where it wasn't an internship. It was still a nice, good job and paid pretty well. And I could work on GIS and all these other things. And I loved that interview because I remember asking what turned out to be my boss and then her boss interviewing me, like, what was so great about working there? What projects did they get to work on? What did they get to do? And they both got so passionate. They had this meter replacement program going on and a few other things with GIS. My boss there, Teresa Lancy, like I said, had gone to the Brent School, and she's really an innovator and a scientist mind and an analyst mind, and very, very similar to me, where she is one of my greatest mentors. And I'm so happy to have taken that position. And it was definitely the right choice for me because it was still a little bit of flexibility. I could take vacations when I wanted to, and I could go to grad school. And she came and saw my final presentation and supported me the whole way. And if I ever needed to go off and do my summer internship, I could just leave that job and come right back to it, which was wonderful and a very unique opportunity to be able to come and go just while I was in grad school. And I really enjoyed it. I ended up working there for 2.5, 3 years around the 2 years I was in grad school. And from there, she said, like, if you want to stay, I'll make this other position for you. You can stay here. Other people that had been through that same technician position that were sort of the same mindset, could do GIS and all these other projects and had these skills, they kept in and made different operator positions or different distribution positions to keep them there doing those projects. But I knew it was time for me to move down, and I really wanted to be in a water district or a wholesale agency or sort of a seat at the table for people making big water management decisions in Southern California, and was able to do that and got the next position I applied for.
I think, okay, you always tell us so much, and I love it because it always brings me to ask like so many questions. Let's go on from what you were saying. I'm kind of just curious, like, you mentioned GIS, and for those people out there who aren't sure what that is, it's pretty much like a mapping system where you take data and you map stuff out. And it's really great because you can find correlations between things. You can just ask those more hypothetical questions, but see it more visually, which I feel like can allow policy to push things a little more better when they have those visuals out there. So would you say like GIS in particular, is that a technical skill that you think is really relevant and necessary for being in the water industry? And can you talk more about maybe other hard skill sets that you think are really important for people who are wanting to get into the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer the later part of the question first, the biggest skill sets, if you want to be hireable and you want to get every interview you sit for, if you have good skills in ArcGIS, that geographic information system mapping, Excel, if you can use your pivot tables and VLOOKUPs and all the formulas, which you can Google pretty easily if you don't know how to use them, it's easy to brush up on those skills. And then if you're good at writing and communicating and can sort of be a translator between groups, I'm always one of those people where I much prefer to have friends and colleagues who are a lot smarter than me and better at things than I am. So having friends in college who were like computer software designers or coders and people that were the engineers and people that were so technical was always wonderful, because sometimes if you're not a technical person and you're speaking to an engineer, it sounds like you're speaking an alien language with them because you just don't quite understand what they're saying. But if you can be a translator between groups, you know what the engineer is saying, you know what the finance people are saying, you know what the policy people are saying, and you can speak each of their languages to where they really understand it. That is one of the best skills to have. And that one's a bit of a softer skill, but it's really helpful. For me, I learned GIS in a great opportunity I had, I think, between my freshman and sophomore year in college, where it was called the Grand Challenges program. They picked, I think, 40 students who were young freshmen in the environmental field and pretty much matched us into an upper graduate level lab, which was a very
Wow, that's awesome.
And I had picked my choices for lab based on sort of who I knew would be a cool person and have a lot of opportunities regardless of if it was my field. So I was in a herpetology lab, which is like turtles, reptiles, salamanders, under Brad Schaefer. And I was terrified of salamanders at the time, but being in that lab, because it was part of like the Luskin School and had a bunch of different dinners and policy things, there were so many opportunities where we were pretty much given the chance to do that research project on our own, and it needed GIS because we were putting out cover boards to catch these little lizards and to see where they were around the campus for climate change research. Very, very small research project, but my lab mate and I, Jesse, we got these advanced GIS licenses, which the researchers there always got, and we sort of self-taught ourselves how to use it. And then at UCLA for the senior year, they have a capstone project, and there they teach people a GIS course, regardless of if you had it in any of your classes. Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't, just depending on what it was. And they made sure everybody in the environmental program left that school with at least a basic understanding of GIS, if not a more advanced understanding. And it just helped me at every job I've ever gotten. I guarantee each one I've had, the technician job needed GIS, and it paid pretty well for an hourly position for that reason. The job I have now, I use it. The job I had before, I used it. They even had a GIS analyst out, so I was the only GIS analyst in that position for a while. It's always helpful. Same thing with Excel. If you have a skill that is easy for you to do and harder for other people to do it, they will keep you around. And they will want you to teach others and share that knowledge, which is great. And I love doing that. And there's always so much to learn, and it's always changing. So those would be the top skills. And definitely if you have them, have a way to show it off. And say I've worked on this cool project, or I've done this, or I've done that. In any field, if you don't even have this skill, you can always get that skill. Just Google it, practice it, learn on your own, and assign yourself a project. So you can say, I have done this, I have written this, I have made this. Even if you didn't have it in a different job, just make sure you know how to use it and how to show it off.
And I think that's a good point because I haven't quite had the opportunity to, present my portfolio to people in person when I was applying because I graduated during the pandemic and everything. But during some of my interviews, I would be talking about some of the projects I'm working on. And then I'd be like, oh, I actually have it here. Can I share my screen and show you? And then they would look at it and be like really impressed that I even had that to the side. And when I was looking at a lot of YouTube videos, it did mention, when you're trying to present projects that you've been doing, not just talk about it, but try to print out some samples to bring with you in your folder when you're interviewing. Is that something that you did, by the way, while you're interviewing?
Not quite that. I mean, I always had some samples of things in my bag, but that was more for me, just if they ever asked to pull it out. But what I always did was, there was a great older girl when I was in college. I must have been a freshman or sophomore. She was a junior or senior, and she was in the environmental field too. She had made her own website, like just a personal website, because I think she was a graduate researcher and she wanted to keep track of some of her projects. It was on Weebly, just one of those free websites. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh, that's really cool. I like that idea. So even as an undergraduate, I made my own little website, put my resume on it, which I wouldn't always recommend doing because it will change a lot, but I always had just the most recent version. And the thing about that is you can hide certain screens in navigation. So maybe only you can access them or they need to be accessed by password or something. But I put up writing samples from college. I was a writer for the undergraduate journal at UCLA. So I put a sample of my published journal piece for that article on there. And then any big report I did, any group projects I did where there was a lot of GIS or analysis or something that would be very much relevant for another job I would want to have outside of school, I would put it up on there. And a lot of those files are still there. And I've changed computers 2, 3, 4 times since then, just since college days. And I do not have any record of those in my hard drives anymore where I could find them, but they live there in a portfolio on that website, whether or not it's seen or unseen on those pages, where I always had that and always had like an iPad or something in my interview bag, whether it was a purse or briefcase or whatever, that I could pull out. And then if anybody was ever looking me up or wanting to look at my work and see it, they could click through a few buttons and find it there. And it was just sort of always accessible for people. And that was great. When I was right out of college, you have maybe not a credit score or you're still getting it off. I remember I had applied for an apartment when I was moving to Santa Barbara. It was like the first, didn't know anybody in town other than my friend, but she was already living with other people. And I was coming in October, just a random month. And later I found out I was approved so quickly and just had it pretty much right away because I was starting a week later, because she'd found my website and she's like, I saw your work. You seem like a smart person and like you got your stuff together. So I didn't need any other paperwork for that, which is really great. And so it can help you in a lot of ways, just as long as you keep it up to date or you keep just bare bones professional things on it. But that's what I would recommend. Or like you said, having a portfolio on you in person, because you never know what they're going to ask for. But depending on the position, sometimes you do know what they would really value. And you could always have that in your back pocket or in your digital back pocket, one way or the other, to bring in.
I think people really do undermine the use of an digital portfolio overall, because there's a lot of websites that you can make for free and you can just really showcase all the projects that you've worked on. And not only, I think, would it serve you to be like a portfolio to show professionally when you want, but I think the great thing about it, if you choose to make it public, is that other people in the industry might be looking for like a freelance person who needs someone for a project, just one project, to do GIS work. And if they're able to find your website and seeing the work that you've done, like that can also present opportunities for you to have some like extra money in your pocket. So I've always been a firm believer in trying to showcase all the work that you can do and the talents that you do have. And I feel like a lot of people are really scared to do that. And I totally get it, right? Because the thing about being a creator or being a creative person or showcasing your work is that you have that risk of people judging you, and that judgment can, like ruin your day, make your day, all these things. But overall, I think, it kind of teaches you to value yourself at what you are. And when you put yourself out there in that way, when you are comparing yourself to other people, you can really just focus back onto the work that you have actually done and put out there, and then decide like, okay, like this other project this person was like really great. I want to take some of the stuff that they've done, and I see the work that I'm putting out there, it's not so great. So let me try to take some of that, put it into my work and make it better. So that's kind of some of the things that I've been experiencing, which I'm sure you have as well. And I know we're coming at time, but let me end it with, maybe you can explain and tell us what you love about your job the most in this field, and what some last advice, words of wisdom that you have for people out there looking, these young high schoolers or early undergrads, grad students, maybe looking to get into this water career, any life that you have.
Yeah, I would say, again, what I love most about this position in the environmental field in general is it really is where humans, animal, the earth, the planet all meet together. Living in California, Southern California, always had water in the brain. My dad used to post the shower water rates in there. He would have like just the water rates of whatever we would have to pay there right next to the showers. We were always aware of spending money and using water in times of drought and just needing to cut back and being aware of that. And I love the innovation we can have in this field. People always need water. They always need to treat it. There's different things that are political about dams, whether or not we should have them or refurbish them or build them, but you always need to do work on water projects, whether it's conveyance systems or other infrastructure, pump and lift stations, just how far water can travel and where it can get to people, and all the different things that you have to be aware of when it comes in. And to most people, you just turn on your tap and it works or it doesn't. Maybe it has a flavor, maybe it doesn't. And there's so much more behind that door. And I would say to anybody in a career, find what you're passionate about and really go after it. And then you can always get new skills. You can always basically work hard to meet the opportunities where they find you. So if the opportunity is not there right now, that's okay. You can still work on the skills to get it the next time it opens up and it comes up in the future. If there's a job you really want now, but you're not quite as experienced, you don't have quite all the skills, still go ahead and apply. The worst thing that happens if they say no. The best thing is you gain a mentor, you gain an open door later on, or an open window you can squeeze your way through if you need it. But just keep working hard, keep going after your passions, and the right opportunities will find you along the way. My path sounds like it makes sense, but each of those was a random shot in the dark at one point where I didn't know what was inside.
Yeah, Marina, thanks for joining me today. I hope you guys out there found some value in this, and don't worry, more will be coming with other friends and professionals in the industry, and hopefully I'll help you guys navigate the space.
Thank you. It was nice being here.